The franchise may have been created a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, but in the decades ever since, we have been inundated with a ton of Star Wars media, at least over the past 20 or 25 years or so. So, as far as the prequel trilogy is concerned, it definitely had the lofty standards of having to try to live up to the original trilogy, as well as the expanded universe of books and the video games. So, how did it do when it came on screen? Well, that's what we're here to talk about today, right here on this particular weekend. And with that, hi once again, everyone. My name's Ken, and this is a Toy Connections online live stream, or TKO, broadcasting towards you, whatever part of the globe you happen to be from. So we're going to talk today about, have the prequels aged well? How did we feel when they first came out? Is there anything collectible? But either way, I had to bring in a few friends from the Star Wars community. So there's a couple of guys here waiting backstage very patiently, and I can't wait to hear their thoughts. So first up, we got my good buddy who I've known for a good number of years already. We've talked on Facebook a whole lot. We've talked on the phone a bunch of times, but it's his first time here talking to me face to face, and I'm honored to have him on the show. He runs the Fandom Power podcast, so you can subscribe to his channel, and the link is in the description below. So Wes from Ontario, how are you today, my friend?
Can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold. Hey, Ken, I'm doing really well right now. It's I don't know, it's what, noon here in Ontario time, and it's great to be here. Happy to be on the show. Thank you for the invitation. Really appreciate that intro. It's there's a lot to unpack.
Well, this is the way, isn't it?
It is, absolutely.
Awesome. Now we got one other guest backstage, and this other individual, I first heard about him because he actually co-hosts the Screen Geeks episodes on the Geek Dad Life 2 channel. As you know, I'm a big fan of that channel and that particular stable of individuals, but he's also got several channels of his own, including live action Star Wars, and he broadcasts every Wednesday at 7:30 in the morning, so you can listen in on your drive to work. And he's got several other channels as well, such as music related channels. This man's just a fan of pop culture all around. So from live action Star Wars and Geek Dad Life 2, this is Ralph.
How's it going?
Going good, buddy. Going good.
Yeah.
Hey, Ralph.
I'm usually the guy with the bigger beard on when I podcast. That's not the case.
What do you
today.
mean? I was watching I was watching your trailer on your channel, and it's like guys with beards, and I'm like, hey, I'm in. More guys with beards talking about Star Wars. Yes.
Yeah, usually I try to find someone with less of a beard than me, and it's not really possible. People are,
and you got to catch up, man.
40 years in, people are still like, have you hit puberty yet? And I'm like, I think so. I might have, All right. So, well, we got a lot to talk about today. Very excited to have this particular conversation, especially on a topic like this that's a little bit less traveled. But you know what? Let's say a quick hello to the chat. Vagon says he'll be missing out on this, but he graciously shared this on Twitter earlier, so I much appreciate that. Gazz, yep, one of the channel members. Always glad to see you in the chat. Johnny Sorensen, I just saw you yesterday on Sergeant Slaughterhouse chat. Life Discord, good to see you. And 16-bit Misfit from the Geek Dad Life Discord as well. Will McLaughlin, one of my patrons, good to see you. Rolando Flores, always good to see you. TJC, and we got a Facebook user who, if you can identify your name, that would be absolutely great. And Kayla says, hi, Ralph. And yeah, all right. So it's funny because just before we jumped online, I was complaining to both these gentlemen. I'm just like, I don't see anyone in the chat. I wonder if the notification went up.
Everybody.
It was either one of two things, right? Like I've been missing notifications lately because they either haven't been happening, and all of a sudden I'm like, so and so premiered or so and so was live earlier today. I'm like, I didn't know that. Either that or people said, oh, Ken doesn't know anything about Star Wars, so they just went and said, we're not going to listen to this guy. Then of course I pop you two on camera, and people are like, oh, we got these guys. I guess we'll jump into the chat.
Oh, we know they didn't come to see me. Like, who was that guy?
Ken brought his bearded buddies. So, yeah. So, you know what? We're going to talk here about the prequel trilogy just because, like I said, it had a lot to live up to when it came out because it was the first piece of media that hit the big screen since the original trilogy and special editions. So there was a lot of expectations, and I remember it was very divisive when it first came out. And I remember just liking it, but I was a teenager at the time, so I was able to swallow up whatever form of media came out. Wasn't quite as how do I put analytical as I eventually became. But we'll do a roundtable panel of questions here. I just want to talk about reactions first when it first came out, as my opening question here. So Wes, when it first came out, how did you feel about it?
Listen, I want to go back, and I want to go just a little bit further back, because before we got the Phantom Menace, you all remember a little thing called the Special Edition.
Yep.
Do you remember those?
Yep.
Okay, so say what you want about the special editions, or the only editions as they are known now, I guess. But Return of the Jedi gave us that shot of Coruscant long before the Phantom Menace ever came out. And when I saw that, I'm like, oh, I cannot wait to see more of this. And so then the Phantom Menace turns up 2 years later, and I had to tell you, the Phantom Menace, I've said this before on our own show, is the Star Wars film that I have seen the most times theatrically at 6. And I probably watch the prequels annually, sometimes more than that. I watched the Phantom Menace again, just getting ready for this, and I am still pulling things out of it. So to say that I was excited back when it came out is a huge understatement. I mean, having had the dark period of no Star Wars, Ralph, you can attest to that. We were just talking about that before. There was no Star Wars for so long, so anything was something, and I liked it then. I like it now, and I like it better without the echo chamber of the internet, to be honest.
Well, that's a great.
Yeah. So this is a shampoo bottle that I had when I was a kid, and it's Chewbacca. And you would get this in 78, something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know when I got that shampoo bottle, but I've had it for a really long time. And to say that the Phantom Menace was hotly anticipated is an understatement. I was going nuts, because for 17 years or so, which now doesn't seem that long a time, but for 17 years there was no Star Wars. And not only was there no Star Wars, kids stopped talking about it, which left me in sort of this little tiny bubble of my own, playing with my toys and not being able to express my love of Star Wars. It wasn't until I was when I turned 19, I started working at Disneyland. I had friends, and I found out they like Star Wars. And I was like, oh, wow. I've spent almost my entire life not talking about Star Wars with anybody. So when the special editions did come out, it was like, this is going to be my first time to see the original Star Wars on the big screen, because I was born 3 months before Star Wars came out. My mom claims she took me to the movie theater, but I don't know about that. I definitely remember seeing. No, I was born.
Okay,
I was born in February of 77. So there's no way I would remember that, but I remember seeing Empire and Jedi for sure. And then, but yeah, you go through my entire Jedi came out when I was 9. So from 9 years old until I was 22, that's a huge chunk of life to not have Star Wars. So the anticipation was huge. I went to go see Meet Joe Black, a movie I'd never see in a million years. I'd never voluntarily go to see Meet Joe Black, but we all found out that the teaser trailer was attached to it. And not only was it at the beginning of the movie, they were also going to play it again after the movie was done.
At the end,
which made you have to sit through Meet Joe Black, because we didn't have the internet. I think episode 2 was the first one you could download a QuickTime file online, and it took about 6 hours, something like that. It was ridiculous.
On dial-up.
And yeah, it was a little box this big, and but any Star Wars you can get at that time, especially prior to special editions, was next to impossible. It just didn't exist. It got me to read some books, and I'm not a reader at all.
I read a few as well.
You're talking
we had a bit of a. I was going to say where we were big big Dungeons and Dragons nerds. So when we found out that there was a Star Wars role playing game, like we were all in, and that sort of kept the flame burning for me. The role playing game, the things that were going on at Dark Horse Comics at the time were pretty interesting. The expanded universe, probably just as divisive as the trilogy.
The X-Wing game got me. The Rebel Assault games.
What about the Thrawn trilogy?
A few things.
What about the Thrawn trilogy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I read the Thrawn trilogy.
Star Wars books I read.
Read the Thrawn trilogy. I enjoyed them. I still think Heir to the Empire is probably the high watermark for that trilogy. It's really good.
I can't tell if she's joking, but Kayla Silva says it's like when her parents took her to see Jurassic Park in theaters when she was 6 months old. I'm like, didn't Jurassic Park come out in 1993? She's a young one if that's the case. So
yeah, interesting.
And somebody reminds me that Wes has the high ground. So yeah, thank you, Connor. But it's 1999, and the question to me, and I was asking my friends at school, will the Phantom Menace outdo Titanic in theaters? And I think ultimately it didn't, but that was a legit question at the time. Yeah.
Wow, I mean, that was part of the conversation. I couldn't stand Titanic, and guess what? I still can't. But
to think that Titanic is now the eighth highest grossing movie of all time now. Like it's not even on my radar anymore.
I wanted Star Wars to demolish it. I really did.
You and me both.
I was actually rooting for it in that, and I was checking like box office stuff, and it was harder to check at the time. We didn't have Wikipedia. But when people were saying no, it didn't make as much as Titanic, I'm like, really? I'm not sure if it's just because Titanic was a love story, so it just appealed to 75-year-old grandmothers at the time.
Well, we all knew how it was going to end.
Ship sinks, right? We didn't know what was going to happen to Qui-Gon at the end of the Phantom Menace. For me, it was like, oh my god! Oh, did you?
Yeah, was there a book? Because there was the soundtrack release came out before the movie came out.
Oh wow!
And I'm a huge film score collector, and one of the tracks on the back said Qui-Gon's Noble End. But then I was like, oh, it's wow. But I kind of had a hunch, like based on the trailers and based on what we knew from the movie. I knew Obi-Wan trains Anakin, and here's this Qui-Gon guy, and I'm like, oh, he's gonna die like Obi-Wan did in the first Star Wars. So for me, it wasn't so much as a spoiler as it was a confirmation of my thoughts. Kind of felt it coming, but there was that the Qui-Gon's Noble End.
Well, that's pretty on the nose.
And one thing I wanted to touch on, because when I first watched it, like I said, I was 17, right? So when I watched it, one of the things that I really enjoyed was obviously the better special effects, the higher production values compared to what we got between 77 and 83, and also the lightsaber duels, like just watching Darth Maul jump around, and even just the acrobatics of whoever did the stunt work for Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor there. So for me, I thought that was really great, and I came out of the theater like, oh my god, that was so much fun. And then hearing the critics kind of be like, the story wasn't that good, and they didn't like this and they didn't like that, I was like, really? And it didn't sink in for me for a very long time why people didn't like the prequels, right? And then Attack of the Clones, because this is talk about all the prequels, not just the Phantom Menace, kind of got shellacked by media as well. And then Revenge of the Sith, everybody was all over why the acting was so bad, right? Which I understand that argument, like some of the really cheesy lines, but it took a long time for me to sink in that people didn't like the prequels, at least at first. And then all of a sudden, years later, people are praising the prequels, and I'm not sure if it's because 7, 8, 9 were worse by comparison for a lot of people, or if it was they just they didn't like the Disney era stuff. I'm not sure, but like as things have aged, all of a sudden it's like, nah, we like the prequels. Have you noticed that, or am I just, is it just the articles I'm reading?
I have some opinions on that, and I'm gonna say this: like we're talking like mostly pre-internet era, like the internet's not widely accessible at this point. The box office figures speak volumes about what people thought of those movies. So I mean, if you, again, that internet echo chamber that we have now, it really paints a different picture. But then fast forward to earlier this year, Kenobi comes out, and like the premiere episode at Celebration, and that room just exploded. Like all those people that were like, yeah, this movie sucks. I mean, you guys all went and saw it. You all went and saw it. So whether it was good or bad or indifferent, you spent your money on it, and that still means something. God, I can't stand when people like are trash these movies. They're not, from a filmmaking perspective, and I am not a filmmaker, there are issues with them. But are they bad? They're not bad. They're fun movies made for kids. And I mean, I saw them as a grown-ass adult, and I still love them. Sorry, I went off there. I'm sorry.
No, that's totally fine. Like, I know it's a panel and all, but we can go off a little bit, so it's all good.
I've never been a fan of saying, like, box office just proves that people are interested in seeing it, not necessarily how good the movie is. Again, Titanic, I think, is an awful movie. I went and saw it because a girl wanted to go see it, and I wanted to go see it with the girl, and so we went and saw it. I thought it sucked. I thought the dialogue was bad. I thought the plot was dumb. I thought it was too long. There was stuff in the effects, even back then, where I was like, that doesn't look real. That doesn't look real. That big wide shot of the Titanic as it goes around, you can see the people shifting around. They're not stuck to the. There's certain things. There's a scene where he's teaching her how to spit, and I'm like, why am I sitting here watching this? I've seen it once. I should probably give it another shot. But the thing is, with box office, it just shows what people are interested in. And what's more interesting is box office second weekend and word of mouth, and see how much it drops. That tells you if it's good or not. Because if I go see Titanic, which I saw like 4 weeks, it was already making all the money. If I go see Titanic and say it sucks to my friend, they're not going to see it. That's one thing. But that opening weekend, if you're interested in seeing that movie, you're going to see it. And a whole lot of people were interested in seeing Star Wars, because you had guys like us who were doing it for nostalgia, the kids who wanted to go see it because that's what the movie was built for. You have grandparents that took their kids. Those guys are now the parents, or everybody. Everybody wants to see Star Wars because no matter what time frame or how old you were when in 77 through 83, like, Star Wars impacted you in some way, and then to have the return, like, it's everybody. Even if you're a kid that doesn't know Star Wars, your parents know Star Wars. Your grandparents know Star Wars. So the same thing happened in 2015 with Force Awakens. Force Awakens was huge. Then people came out of the woodwork and, oh, it's just like the first one and stuff. But the thing is, when the prequel came out, when Phantom Menace came out, I went to Chinese theater because I'm in Southern California, and because I'd seen every documentary about Star Wars during those dark times, and every time they showed the Chinese theater and the teens running to get there to see R2-D2 and Darth Vader and C-3PO put their feet in the cement, like, I'm like, if I'm going to see Star Wars after all these years, I'm seeing it at the Chinese theater. Waited in line for 10 hours, got 50 tickets, I think. Friends and family and everybody showed up. It was a big to-do. Everyone had their lightsabers. I had my Qui-Gon lightsaber because it just came out and it was awesome looking.
I had that one too.
Because when that was like one of the first collapsing lightsabers you can get. They didn't make like lightsaber toys forever. And I came out of the movie and I hated it. I hated it. I did not like Phantom Menace whatsoever.
Okay.
I know that it's because there was a lot that this movie had to prove for me or had to do for me. And I did not like it. It didn't stop me from seeing it 9 times in theaters that summer. Because the thing is, I waited so long to see a Star Wars, and now every day of the summer is a day where I can go see a Star Wars in a theater.
Right.
I'm like, pod race is cool. Lightsaber battles are cool. I don't really care much for the Senate stuff, but like all the Jedi stuff is neat. I'm willing to wait through a 10-minute scene of the Senate to get to the Star Wars stuff I've been clamoring to see.
I would say that I had a real curiosity about that movie, and I was looking for people. Have you seen it yet? No? Yep. Do you want to go? And that was my excuse to go again.
Yeah. And it was summer in Southern California, so it was hot in 1999.
Yeah.
And it'd be like me and my friends would be hanging around our house because I was 22 years old, living in an apartment with a bunch of dorks. And we're like, we didn't have air conditioning. We just want to go see Star Wars. We go spend $5, sit in air conditioning for 2 hours plus, and just wait for those scenes. Just wait for the pod race, wait for the lightsaber battles. And then it didn't really change my opinion back then, watching it 8 times. It just became sort of easier to cope with. But,
fair enough. And for me, it was just the introduction of the coolness factor of Darth Maul, and how I think it was Ray Park who did the stunts and all that. Am I wrong? It is right, because he also did.
He's Darth Maul. Yeah,
he's Darth Maul, right? Okay, yeah. So just watching him jump around and do all the stunts with the double-bladed lightsaber, and how he's a legit threat to 2 Jedi, and how it shows like the dark side of the Force is actually stronger, right? No? Yes?
It definitely comes across that way. I was just going to say, if there's one thing about the prequel trilogy that I will say that is consistent across all 3 movies, is that they've underutilized the villains. I mean, all the Clone Wars aside, which totally redeems that character. Every film, like, oh, Darth Maul is an amazing villain, dead. Oh, Count Dooku, he's okay, but then you got Jango Fett, oh, cool villain, dead. General Grievous, who I thought was going to be this amazing villain, dead. So underutilized.
But that's what's great about it, is George Lucas sleight of hand. For those kids growing up not knowing Star Wars and watching these prequels,
yeah,
they think these guys are the bad guys, but they're not. Palpatine.
No villain thing. Yeah,
and
no
it's
villain.
So great. Palpatine is so amazing.
Yeah.
Ian McDiarmid's portrayal of Palpatine is so amazing. And to throw these sort of quote cool villains of the week in there, it's a sleight of hand. It's the Darth Maul looks the way he does because you want to think that's the bad guy.
Yeah,
that's the guy I need to focus on. But when he dies, you're like, oh well, he's not the one I'm supposed to be focusing on. Who am I supposed to focus on? And meanwhile, Palpatine's in the shadows, and he's the dude you really need to be looking after. Not the guy that looks evil, but the guy who's being shifty behind the scenes. Yeah. So with the disposable villains, it's kind of fun, especially when you think about Palpatine getting all these people together. Darth Tyrannus and General Grievous and all these guys, and it's like he's got a collection of weirdos. That's just amazing.
Well, speaking of weirdos, hey, 16-bit Misfit, no swearing in the chat.
The Jar Jar.
I was waiting for somebody to bring him up. I was sorry.
Is that an Ahmed Best autograph?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, that's cool.
He's the best friend.
That's awesome.
So yeah. I don't know if I'm going to spoil it here for you guys, but I just want to let you know I've done a complete turn on the Phantom Menace and I absolutely love it. It's probably the Star Wars movie I watch the most.
Oh, wow.
When I pop on Star Wars, it is time does do things, and it's not just because like watching the Clone Wars, but like it just come to like, I don't know what it is. It's the same movie. It's been the same movie since day one. Except for like an extra, pod race lap here or there. But
the abandonment of that horrific Yoda puppet. Thank you.
Yeah, even back then I knew.
I knew you were gonna bring that up.
But the thing is, I kind of like what was great about the prequels is they came out every 3 years, like the original trilogy.
Yeah.
You had time to kind of think about it, time to let it set in, and sort of gel in your brain on what Star Wars is now. Mm-hmm. So by the time Attack of the Clones came out, I loved it. I know the love stuff is a little bit dicey.
Yep.
And if you guys, I don't know if you guys had the chance to check out the IMAX version when that was released back in 2003. No. I wish that version was available. You guys would, if you don't like Attack of the Clones, you'd love Attack of the Clones, the IMAX version. They had to cut something out. They had to cut out like 15 minutes or something of footage for the IMAX, because the IMAX platter could only hold so much film.
Really? Okay.
And so they took the end credits, they took the entire end credits, put them on like 4 static cards at the end, and the end credits flashed like 4 cards for like, I don't know, like 20 seconds. And then anything that didn't need to be in the movie story-wise got taken out. The love story gets chopped like dramatically. No shacks, no riding shacks, the picnic scenes cut down. The droid factory, essentially, you know how when C-3PO falls off the droid, falls off the like walkway down onto the conveyor belt
on the conveyor,
and then he gets picked up and thrown around, and this is a nightmare, all that stuff.
Yeah.
In the IMAX cut, he falls down and lands directly on the belt that knocks his head off.
Okay.
So it's like they just trim so much fat. Attack of the Clones, the Attack of the Clones IMAX version is essentially an Obi-Wan movie.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's essentially what happens. If you get a chance, I don't know if it's even available. I'm sure there's comparisons online on the IMAX cut versus the original, but that IMAX cut is like the perfect Attack of the Clones, which is might be my favorite of the prequels. I don't know.
Really,
it kind of wavers. I really like Attack of the Clones. Because when I going into 1999, seeing Star Wars and seeing young Obi-Wan, what I wanted to see was Obi-Wan as a young Jedi doing essentially what he was doing in Attack of the Clones, being a detective, being being this spy. I wanted to see big lightsaber. I want to see all kinds of Jedi in battles. I wanted to see stormtroopers. I wanted to see droids. I wanted to see these huge. I wanted to see the Clone Wars.
Yeah, you wanted to see
Phantom
the war.
Menace. Phantom Menace didn't have any of that stuff. It had Jedi stuff, but really you only get to see Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan ignite their lightsabers. You don't really get to see Mace Windu. There's this promise of Samuel L. Jackson's going to be in a Star Wars and he's a Jedi. How cool is that going to be? We got that in, but we didn't get that in Phantom Menace. We got it in Attack of the Clones.
We got him for the Jango Fett scene. And yes, you know what? I think because you get to see some lightsaber stuff at the beginning of Phantom Menace with the droids, and you get to see the very quick duel between Qui-Gon and Darth Maul, and then the big duel of the fates at the end. Well, the problem with Attack of the Clones, fast forwarding 3 years now, is you get a bit of the intrigue at the beginning about how they're supposed to protect Padme, and I felt there was a lot in between that I didn't care about, and then at the end when they get to the arena, then it gets good. So for me, that's why Attack of the Clones is always my least favorite, but I did not think about the IMAX cut until you brought it up. Yeah,
but like the stuff with Obi-Wan and Kamino is some of my favorite Star Wars stuff. All of that stuff, the city on the ocean and stuff. Also, I mean, for me, I'm in a unique situation, and I'm going to bring out this toy because this is Toy Connection, and I'm not a toy collector per se. I'm more of a but this is my Flash Gordon action figure from Go Hero, and Flash Gordon I'm a huge fan of.
And this so much Flash Gordon influence.
the serials from the 1930s and 1940 are incredible. Also a major influence on George Lucas. And what's great about the prequel trilogy is they feel more like a Flash Gordon serial than the original trilogy ever did. And so coming from that perspective, even the titles, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, The Phantom Menace, like these are all titles you would get from Flash Gordon. There was like episodes called The Fiery Abyss, Trapped in the Turret, so the Purple Death. Like these are the titles of the serials, and I feel like this is George Lucas finally being able to make his Flash Gordon. And if you watch Flash Gordon serials, the dialogue's clunky, the acting's not great. There's a lot of special effects that are kind of goofy. There's spaceships and light bridges and laser fights and ray guns. So all of this stuff, there's swashbuckling and punching and fighting. Attack of the Clones feels like a Flash Gordon serial. And I just, for some reason, when that one came out and sort of settling into what the Phantom Menace was, Attack of the Clones was like, yes, I get it now. This is what George Lucas is doing. And then, of course, I mean, Revenge of the Sith is great. They're all great. I really turned a corner. That first viewing of Phantom Menace definitely has changed until right now. Like, I really love the prequels, and I might put them on more than the original trilogy.
I absolutely do. I'm a big home theater guy, and every time I do an upgrade, I always throw in the opening sequence, the space battle of Revenge of the Sith, because it's just so dynamic, audio wise. It's everywhere, and I just love it.
Yes, for me, that was the best of the prequels. And I think a lot of people felt the same way too, because I think
it's the best. I think George grew.
The worst. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So with regards to all that, like this ties into kind of the next question that I had, which is, how much do you gentlemen feel that the prequels have added to the Star Wars lore, and by extension, if they aged well? What do you think, Wes?
Well, I put some thought in. You asked these questions the other day, and I put some thought into it. And have they aged well? I mean, we can all, I think, sort of agree that from a technical standpoint, they are showing their age. That being said, I mean, they didn't really. I mean, yeah, they got rid of the Yoda puppet and they changed a couple little things here and there, but those movies remain largely unchanged since their theatrical release. And even going back and watching The Phantom Menace 3 days ago, it still looks pretty good. So I mean, I have
to agree.
They're easy to consume, and I do like them for that reason. That I think they do hold up on a visual perspective, and that's just a testament to Lucasfilm and ILM, who essentially invented the technology they needed to make their films, and trailblazing, kind of on the leading edge of that stuff. It still looks good all this time later. As far as the lore is concerned, though, I mean, that's really, there is a lot to unpack there on, like, I'll say this, the first 5 minutes of The Phantom Menace, the Republic cruiser comes in, lands on the Trade Federation battleship, and in the first 5 minutes, in those establishing shots, you have all of the elements that would influence the look of Star Wars for the next 20 years in 5 minutes of film. And I mean, I think everybody would well, maybe not everybody, but it is largely accepted that the Clone Wars is some of the best Star Wars going. And I mean, without the prequel trilogy, there's no Clone Wars.
There's no Rebels.
And there's no Rebels, and arguably there would be no Mandalorians. So I mean,
or Bad Batch.
There's this cyclical relationship that Star Wars has with itself, where as George Lucas said, it's like rhyming stanzas of a poem. I'd said to you, Ken, at its most simplistic form, it's the reason why we have multiple characters across multiple generations recycling the same lines of dialogue, but it's bigger than that. I mean, you have this sort of nuance and context that, Ralph, you wonder why it's different now. We're older men. we don't see the world the same way we did when we were teenagers or in our 20s. And
exactly.
A lot of my opinions sort of hinge on sort of the modern Star Wars media that, like I say, they've added context and nuance to those films and have made them better. I don't know if they would be as fondly remembered without that. So it's this there's a big relationship dynamic that you can't not talk about to say, have they added to the lore? The straight up answer is yes. Yeah. Yes, they have. And I'm going to shut up now, or I'm going to dominate this conversation.
I mean, of course, they 100% added the lore, because I mean, in Star Wars 1977, one of the first things we learn is that Obi-Wan was in the Clone Wars with Luke's father.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's all we got. That's all we got. And then this is it. This is what happened. And in the prequel trilogy, they raise more questions, and they bring up things and don't explain it, but it leaves it open for the Dave Filoni's and Jon Favreau's of the world to go out and expand on those ideas. And then just as far as, like, you were talking about like the special effects and stuff, and it still looks good. I think that's a testament to people like Doug Chiang.
Oh yeah.
The art design. So even if the CG doesn't look great, or if something doesn't look as good as it does now, it still has a charm to it. Like, I like the old Flash Gordon serials. I mentioned that. and the effects are super janky. It's literally spaceships on wires.
On wires.
And but it sets it in a specific time and place, and there's a charm to it. And I think if you do something stylistically enough, it doesn't matter what you used, like if you use CG or if it was hand paint or whatever you used, it's still going to have a charm to it. As long as it's stylized, it kind of has this, it makes it timeless. Because if you do it completely realistic, it can start to get dated. So I like the style of the prequels, and it took me a while to get used to, because the prequels didn't look like Star Wars, because Star Wars used to be beat up ships and dirty hallways and, you know, a lived in world. And here's the prequels, which had a nice Art Deco look to it. And it took me a while to realize, well, yeah, this is when it was great. This was when everything was nice and clean and new, and there was enough, you know, wealth spread around for them to keep up their palaces and their spaceships and stuff. Then the Empire came along, you lose all of that, and now everything's dingy, and you have to like scavenge for parts, and you have to be a scoundrel or a spice runner or something. And
I
it just
think
turns.
that's part of the. I think that's part of the discourse. So why can I call it the gatekeepers of the world that decree original trilogy only? I think that's part of that aspect of the prequel trilogy is part of what created that divide, that it was so drastically different in the visuals.
But what's great now, what we're seeing now though is, I'll use the example of the Book of Boba Fett, and we have the Mandalorian with his N1 starfighter, which is a prequel area thing with the sensibilities of the original trilogy, and it's bringing those together, and it's the perfect thing. And it's that listen, you can like the original trilogy, how everything was a hot rod and built out of stuff, and you can like the prequel trilogy where everything was slick. We're saying this all exists under one world, and we could come together and coexist, and it just shows it in that one spaceship. Like that is Star Wars. Star Wars has been kit bashing since day one, taking parts from other stuff and turning it into this new thing. I mean, George Lucas took Wizard of Oz, Seven Samurai, Hidden Fortress, Westerns. He took all of these things and just mashed it into a big ball called Star Wars. And so it's kind of fun to see folks doing that now. And, you know, Mandalorian can be a Western. Book of Boba Fett can be, like a crime show or like a criminal underworld show. Like I like this idea of them taking different genres and bringing it in Star Wars, because it's what it should be. Star Wars is an outlet to show, like, where's the music? I don't like musicals, but I feel like they should play with that. That's what Star Wars should be like. What would it be like through the Star Wars filter? I wouldn't mind a straight up horror movie.
This is what I really love about what shows like The Bad Batch are doing, and arguably what we've seen so far for Andor, where it's just smack dab right in the middle between eras, and we get this blending of style and substance, and it's just so. I just want more. Give me more.
Yeah.
Is there something to be said though for you already know the fate of the characters, so does it make it kind of
no?
Like that drives me nuts. Okay, it drives me nuts. I'm excited for Andor for the story and that, but the fact that I know Cassian's fate, it kind of lowers the stakes. Same with the Obi-Wan series, which I knew how it was going to go down, but I really like the Obi-Wan series. Yeah. I felt like what they did with, I'm not going to say retcon, but how they were able to take all the knowledge we know and put it, like, fill in the gaps and sort of, you know, get everything to sort of come together again. Prequel and original trilogy. Another great example of the connective tissue, creating the connective tissue and making it a really entertaining, 8 episode series. And like, that's what I want. I think that, I think if you, I'm fine with that. But at this point in my Star Wars viewing, especially in the Disney era, I'm ready to move beyond characters that we already know are dead in other
Okay.
things.
Yeah,
So I'm
ready for
super
new
excited. Like
stories.
Andor's okay, but Ahsoka I'm excited for because I've watched Rebels and everything that, you know, with Ahsoka and the crew of the Ghost and stuff. We don't know their fate. We don't know their fate. So I'm really excited to see that movie or that show move that story forward, because I don't know what happens to any of those characters.
I'm
So
looking
that to me
for
is
a
exciting.
I'm looking for a Force Ghost out of Kanan Jarrus.
Freddie Prinze Jr.
I think that would be great. I think he could totally do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned the Obi-Wan series there, and that was one of those. I was always going to come into that one biased because I've always been a fan. Like, Obi-Wan's my favorite character of all time. But over on Sergeant Slaughterhouse, we had an episode with me and Zazel and one of the patrons, Brendan Haley. Oh, that's cool.
Very nice.
And I remember, like, one of us was like representing the glass half empty, which was Brendan, and I was representing the glass half full. My problem was I only saw it as, you know, like glass half full, maybe a little more, because I really like Obi-Wan. But I couldn't get behind the Reva character. So once we got into the Reva character, I was like, Brendan, you win this part of the argument. There's no way. I just cannot defend the way she was handled. The concept of Reva was cool. How she got handled, not that much. So, and then did they have to drag it out to 6 episodes? Could they have done it in 4? Like, there's a lot that could be said about that. So I could only defend it to a degree, and I just defaulted to a lot of our, I don't want to say argument because we were all friends, but I was like, nope, you win this round. I can only defend it so far.
Spent a lot of time talking about Reva as we were reviewing the Obi-Wan series, and we kind of hit it early on that it was her motivation, and it came out. Where were you, Obi-Wan? Where were you when my friends were being slaughtered? Where were you? And I really enjoyed that aspect of her character.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I liked her a lot. I thought the idea, you know, behind these sort of orphans of the Force was really, really interesting.
Yeah.
Especially, like, I mean, I find her resolution really interesting. I really like the way it was handled, where she had a choice.
Mm-hmm.
She essentially had the same choice as, you know, Anakin.
Mm-hmm. Redemption is a huge theme in Star Wars, and we talked about, is this woman going to be redeemed? And we all kind of thought, oh, she's going to be redeemed at the end. But I'm like, the woman who just hacked that guy's hand off at the beginning of the series cannot be fully redeemed in this series unless it's posthumously, because you've just done that much evil stuff your entire life. So the fact that she kind of shambled off and gets to live a different life, and we don't necessarily have to see that, is a very poetic send-off for her.
Yeah.
Like I said, I like the idea of the Reva character, but I just felt very polarized the whole time. Because like you said, she does all these evil things, and all of a sudden she goes on this redemption arc, and I'm like, but how much do they draw us in to care?
But the
like,
thing is,
I would read about it.
Works.
But
it works because she's so blinded by hate. The entire series, she's blinded by hate. And it culminates to this point where she is pointing her lightsaber at a child. She's become the person that she saw, the thing that traumatized her when she was a kid.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It's it's
walking the
it's
precipice,
a moment,
as it were.
It's a moment where it's this huge realization. Like, she's so full of rage, and she's hated Anakin her whole life because of what he did to her friends and to her. That it's like, it took her becoming Anakin to realize what Anakin was. And it just, I felt like her pointing the lightsaber at Luke was, I mean, that's huge. That's huge for that story. And I feel like she might not be like a good person now, but she's definitely a changed person.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I don't need everything over explained, but I would like to see her character revisited.
I would love to see her come back in some capacity down the road, for sure.
Like, I would be cool with if she shows up in Ahsoka.
Okay.
I feel like there's something
for that too.
There's something we've seen sort of. We caught glimpses of the bad guy becoming good when Darth Vader becomes good for that moment and saves Luke's life by killing the Emperor, or or Dispatching of the Emperor. We've seen Adam Driver. We've seen Kylo Ren become Ben for just that little moment. I want to see a more long form version of what it's like for the bad guy to try to become good. I wouldn't mind seeing a Reva story, even if it's a mini series or even if it's like a movie, like a but to be able to have to live with that. We've seen characters with PTSD, but we want to see characters that were bad who are now living with their skeletons. I think it's an interesting take. I assumed, probably a lot of people assumed, that her story arc was going to end with a big lightsaber battle with her and Obi-Wan. The fact that it didn't, I think it's a nice, refreshing change.
I feel like that instance, singularly almost gives credence to the negotiator. We never got to see Obi-Wan negotiate a treaty, a settlement, a conflict, and for him to
he always got interrupted. He always got interrupted to have to pull out his white lightsaber. So, but you see what we did there. We went from the original from the prequel trilogy, and we talked about the things that spun off, like Obi-Wan, like Reva. So I guess it was almost a rhetorical question about has it added to the lore. It's a yes, but was it a resounding yes? And what they've added, have they just added fluff to milk the franchise, or have they added something of substance? What I'm hearing from both of you is that there's a lot of substance, and if there is fluff, we can ignore it.
Go back to Darth Maul or Maul for a second. I mean, that disposable pack dog that he was in the Phantom Menace has now become one of the most nuanced antagonists in the entire franchise.
Yeah.
Even got a return to live action. I mean, for a couple seconds, but still.
Well, he becomes a big deal during Clone Wars and during Rebels.
And Rebels, yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, I mean, spoiler alert for people, he finds a way to live. But it's a long, So I guess with that, where do you guys see the prequel trilogy stacking up to the original trilogy and the other peak parts of the Disney era Star Wars, such as I guess it resulted in Clone Wars, but things like, how does it stack up to Mandalorian? How does it stack up to the original trilogy? Maybe Ralph, we'll kick things off with you.
It's hard to say. The thing is, like, I'm a big James Bond fan. And there's James Bond movies where he goes to outer space. There's James Bond movies that are like straight up, like grounded thrillers. There's like this all kinds of variety across those 25 movies. And now with all the variety of Star Wars we have, it's hard to sort of rank them against each other. I feel like they're all great. I like all Star Wars. There isn't a Star Wars I don't like. I love Solo. Solo is one of my favorite movies, just because it's a Flash Gordon action adventure. Not really into mythology. It's not. The characters are black and white. It's just on the surface a fun adventure movie. So if I'm in the mood on a Saturday morning for a fun adventure, I'll watch that. If I want to watch something and sit down and really pay attention and have look into something a little deeper and get into the mythology a little more, I might watch like The Last Jedi. So the fun thing is about Star Wars is we're getting so much of it now. I grew up with 3 movies and 2 Ewok shows. There's so much Star Wars now that there's almost like a Star Wars for whatever mood I'm in. And that's great. I like the Disney movie. Rise of Skywalker. A lot of people don't like it. I love it. I love that it's like an adventure movie. It's what George always wanted. Faster, more intense. The pace of The Rise of Skywalker is so nuts. When I came out of the theater the first time, my head was spinning. I had no idea what I just saw. Like, it starts off with the Millennium Falcon light speed skipping. They don't explain what that is, but it's insane. And it's almost like watching that movie Speed Racer. It's just images hitting your eyes so fast that you come out your head spinning. But what's great about it is now that you've seen it and now you can kind of cope with what you just saw, you go back and watch it the second time and you're like, okay, now I understand what's going on, but it's not slow paced where I'm bored. It's still exciting. And so if I'm in the mood for like a really fun, like insane ride, like I'll pop on Rise of Skywalker. If I just want to have like, if I want to feel, if it's cold outside, which is rare here in Southern California, but if it's like cold and rainy, like today's nice and cold and rainy, and I want a nice comforting blanket, I'll put on Star Wars 77. You know, it's that's what I just love about Star Wars is there's anything. If I feel like watching an animated series like Rebels, I love Rebels. So I love that there's variety. That's my favorite thing is that there's variety.
Okay, fair enough. Wes?
Wow. What was the question again? I was too busy. I was fixed on Ralph.
That's okay. It's easy to be that. Yeah.
Honestly, you know, Ralph, I echo a lot of your sentiments. I also love Rebels. I love the Tartakovsky Clone Wars. I love the Ewoks and Droids cartoons. And, you know, I like that all this Star Wars exists. This is something I've talked about many times before, like that whole, when people use the term, you know, Disney Star Wars ruined my childhood. And I'm like, well, then you had a pretty awful childhood if that's the case. I mean, all of this stuff that you love still exists, and you can go and consume that anytime you want, and the new stuff doesn't take anything away from that. And as Ryan Johnson just came out and said, like, he wasn't trying to tear down the mythology, he was trying to build the mythology. And I agree with him that good, bad, or indifferent, he was successful at doing that. I love all Star Wars, well, with the exception of the Yuuzhan Vong series of books, but that's a whole other thing. But the visual media, I love it. I just, like you say, it lifts me up, it brings me down, it just makes
I have huge problems with Last Jedi. Huge problems. But all of the story revolving around Rey, Kylo Ren, and Luke Skywalker are some of my favorite Star Wars stuff ever. And so, like, even if there's something that I don't like about a Star Wars thing, there's plenty that I do love. And you like that goes with every single thing. There's stuff in Mandalorian season 1 that I'm just like, okay, he's walking through the desert again. That's kind of boring. But then, you know, I watched the Light and Magic series, and they show shots of the Mandalorian. I'm like, oh, that's so beautiful. I kind of want to just watch the Mandalorian walk around in the desert for an hour. So you know what? I'll pop it on. Like there's always something to love in Star Wars. And that's one of the things with fandom. Even though I hated Phantom Menace when I first saw it, there was definitely still things I liked about it. And so there's no sense in going in and say like bashing Reva or bashing Jar Jar or, you know, doing any of this stuff. Instead of that, talk about the pod race is great.
Yes,
it is.
The lightsaber battle with the rocks between Darth Vader and Obi-Wan was amazing.
Darth
Vader getting that scar on his head from Obi-Wan that we saw in The Empire Strikes Back.
Yes.
And we saw the back of his head. Like he got that from Obi-Wan in that series. So it's like you might not like one aspect. You might not like Reva. You might not like Lola or Princess or whatever you don't like. There's going to be something in there that you do. And as we say on our show, don't give it a hate and celebrate the love. Like find what you like and be passionate about it. And then if someone else disagrees with you, have a conversation. Because if somebody doesn't like the Rise of Skywalker, I'll talk to them all day, but I don't have to be mean about it.
No, absolutely, yeah.
Well, I will mention there the thing about the rocks. I have heard more than a few people say that sort of just was a new power that came out, and I'm like, maybe there's something I don't understand because Star Wars isn't my number one love among all my passions. I'm like, isn't that just him using the Force though, like lifting, and then is that not what it is? Because it's been framed like he got this new power where he can throw rocks. I'm like, I thought he was just using the Force. I think the bigger argument is how well he can use the Force given that he's out of practice. But I think that's a legit Force power. Both of you are nodding, so I'm
lifting
guessing
rocks. Yeah,
there's just so much analogy to Obi-Wan and old man Luke Skywalker in that moment. That whole shutting yourself off from the Force and then reopening himself. And as we never got to experience that with Luke. He went from being a hermit to Force projecting himself across the galaxy. We got to see Obi-Wan reconnect, and that was such a I felt like I was on the emotional journey with him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, you know what? I didn't. I mean, I knew you both were big Star Wars fans. I didn't. I didn't realize that you were both as insightful. I
Scuba
mean,
Pete, thank you
that's
very
not true.
much.
Yeah, thank you, Scuba Pete. I knew you're both insightful as well. But what I do want to ask them, because this will be the second part of the loaded question. Actually, I've had a few loaded questions today, so maybe it's like the fifth loaded question. I don't know. But like, what about the sequel trilogy then? Because there's even more hate for the sequel trilogy in general. And I don't rewatch it anywhere near as much as I watch the prequel trilogy. Like, let's just very quickly dive into that. Maybe Wes?
Wow, sequel trilogy. Okay, so The Force Awakens was the roadmap for the entire trilogy. And I'm going to do this very quickly. I love The Force Awakens. I love The Force Awakens so much. And I don't care that it is a beat for beat retelling of A New Hope. Again, that's that cyclical nature of Star Wars, that things are familiar, but they're told in a new way that is engaging. The Last Jedi, the joke about being the slowest space car chase ever. Okay, sure, but still, there are lots of things to like about that movie. The fact that that the fans were subverted, well, that's just the way it is. I mean, I feel like the farther we get away from it, or as I was saying yesterday, Ken, I think the closer that modern Star Wars television, because that's kind of the focus right now, as we in universe get closer to the sequel trilogy, modern Star Wars TV is going to do the same thing for the sequel trilogy that the Clone Wars has done for the prequel trilogy.
I hope so. 100%. I really hope so. Bam, Ralph.
It's already doing it.
Absolutely,
it's already doing it. So in the Bad Batch, we get sort of shades of Snoke. We get that the Kaminoans are grabbing Jedi. In the very first episode, you see them walking a Jedi into the Kamino cloning facility.
Yep.
So this is all sort of bringing stuff together on that, meme of somehow Palpatine's returned. That's all. And then it's being also planted in Mandalorian season 2. We see a facility that looks like a cloning facility, and they're wearing the Kaminoan symbol.
Dr. Pershing, right from the first first season 1. Yeah.
So all of this stuff, all this cloning, midichlorian stuff, and Grogu, all this stuff is sort of, if your brain can easily start filling in the gaps of how Palpatine returned. It's great. I think as far as the sequel trilogy goes, like, listen, I'm 45 years old now. When I was 9 years old, I thought Star Wars was done. I thought it was done. That was it. No more Star Wars. George Lucas made the last one. So everything that's come out since 1983 has been a nice cherry on top of my Star Wars. So prequel trilogy, even though I didn't like it at first, I've come around. I think they're great. Just icing on the cake. So, like, I would rather have more Star Wars than no Star Wars. So, like, my thoughts on the prequel trilogy, say what you will about the story or how they were handled, or Rian Johnson versus J.J. Abrams. Hey, they each got dealt a hand, and they did what they could with it.
They did. I agree with that.
It's characters I love. It's a universe I love. I like seeing the new worlds. Kylo Ren, Rey are two of my favorite Star Wars characters of all time, which is saying a whole lot considering that the franchise has been around for 45 years. I don't have a bad thing to say about the sequel trilogy. I mean, I probably could if I wanted to go and nitpick, but I'm just here to enjoy the ride. I'm happy that in the grand cosmic scheme of things, I was born in 1977. Of all the time that Earth has existed, I am so happy that I was born in 1977 to enjoy Star Wars. And if anybody out there hates Star Wars and anything Star Wars is doing, like, just either stop watching it, or I don't know what to do.
It's so easy.
It's so easy to find the things you like.
Get a new hobby.
There's so much Star Wars. I don't like reading. So guess what? I don't go read the books and then just complain about them.
I like to remind people who like who like to deride the Disney era of Star Wars, I love to remind them that everything after 2014. So like everybody who's like, oh, Rebels is so good. Rogue One is so good. Disney Star Wars there, folks.
Yeah. And the last season of Clone Wars.
Yes, absolutely.
Mandalorian.
There's a complaint that Book of Boba Fett shifted over to Mandalorian stories.
Oh yeah, that's a great point.
Yes,
it's a valid point. Yes, but another thing is Boba Fett was dead in 1983. We should have no Boba Fett stories. George Lucas brought him in 2002, and of the 6, there's like 6 episodes of Book of Boba Fett, and I think 4 of them are real Boba Fett heavy. That's 4 more episodes. That's 2 hours of
the amount of information that we have about Boba Fett now. That's not the Boba Fett I grew up with. Well, the Boba Fett you grew up with had 7 minutes of screen time and 3 lines. Right. So don't tell me that's not the Boba Fett.
He's no good to me, dead.
And this is about his rebirth. This is that character coming back to life, and again redeeming himself and sort of becoming something better. You can still have all those books and comic books and those bounty hunter games and everything, and still have that Boba Fett to love. This is him as a 60-year-old man. Like he's settling down. When all these haters of the Book of Boba Fett turn 60, they're gonna get it.
You know what?
Understand.
I put some thought into this. We were talking about this before when they talked about the Mandalorian going forward, that the Mandalorian in future subsequent seasons would no longer be known as the Mandalorian. That totally made sense to me. And when you think about, remember when they made the announcement for the Clone Wars, the animated series, there was a big cardboard standee thing that was kind of making the rounds, and it had the Clone Wars logo, and right below that it had a giant Boba Fett helmet. And they said, we're going to get a live action Boba Fett thing. I kind of think that, by hook or by crook, the Mandalorian is what that Boba Fett thing maybe was conceptualized. And it makes it a little bit easier for me to digest the Book of Boba Fett thing is, think of it this way. Knowing that the Mandalorian was going to be go through at least a title change at some point down the road, if you thought about it as the Mandalorian, the Book of Boba Fett, it's a lot easier to stomach as it is just one chapter. What is the Mandalorian? Is it Din Djarin? Is it Boba Fett? Is it Bo-Katan? We could have the Mandalorian, the Book of Bo-Katan, in a season or 2 down the road. The Mandalorian, the Book of Sabine Wren. There's so many options.
Yep. Also, Sabine being big in Rebels. Yeah.
Also, if we didn't get that Mandalorian storyline, we would have less Ahsoka, Luke Skywalker.
Oh my God.
That Luke Skywalker episode. Hey, listen, I know Boba Fett isn't in this episode of Book of Boba Fett, but you know who is? Luke Skywalker from 1983.
Yeah.
Straight up looking legit. Like there were no seams in that effect. It's season 1 or season 2 of Mandalorian. You can kind of be like, I know, I understand.
I know it's CG
aging and all that stuff, but the lighting and it looked.
I stood up in my living room, took 3 steps towards my TV, and immediately started wiping my eyes. I'm like, what? I was openly weeping as this was happening. It was the most emotional journey I had been on in Star Wars in such a long time.
Yeah, well, Star Wars Theory, the guy who runs that channel, he openly wept about it, right, and proudly so, right?
Yeah, my wife, when we watched the Mandalorian, the season 2 finale, and I saw the X-wing, I started shaking, and it's insane to think because we just saw Luke Skywalker in Last Jedi and
so
stuff. My wife had to literally put her hand on my shoulder. I was convulsing at that slow burn reveal. And I was
the green lightsaber.
My brain. I was probably singing out loud. It can't be Luke. It can't.
As soon as you saw the wing markings.
I'm not even that deep into it. I didn't even notice the wing markings because I was like, an X-wing. But then when I saw the lightsaber hilt,
oh my gosh, yeah.
When I saw this, I'm like, nobody took this away from Luke.
Yeah, exactly.
It's Luke Skywalker, and I started shaking and crying. And it's so insane because we saw Mark Hamill in The Force Awakens. It's like he's not but it was just like, get ready, Ralph. Here comes your childhood.
Yeah.
This is 9-year-old Ralph hasn't seen this guy, you know, in 30 years.
Well, that's, I mean, and
Yeah.
I want to go back to, and this kind of ties into what Ralph said, but when Wes mentioned that some people mentioned that Disney era Star Wars ruined their childhood. And maybe because it's all technically like one canon storyline and expanded universe being different now, but like everyone knows I'm a Transformer guy. I never once said that Michael Bay Transformers ruined my childhood of Transformers. Nope. Like the fact I get to watch my nephew go and enjoy a Transformers, it's not for me. I will shellac on it left, right, and center. But at the end of the day, it introduced it to a new audience and in many ways bridged them back to the 84 look of Transformers. Same thing with like people sorry, Ralph, you're gonna jump in first.
I was gonna say, what about that first 5 minutes of Bumblebee?
That opening sequence of Bumblebee.
Bam! You see how things tie in, and also like people widely harp on wrestling for the last few years. Like just because you weren't a fan of, and I know he's turned the corner for those wrestling fans, Roman Reigns pre-Tribal Chief era, like pre-2020, like 2015 to 20 Roman Reigns, everyone harps on. Does anybody say it ruined my childhood of Hogan and Rock and Austin, or for me, Bret Hart? You know, I don't know how it can possibly do that. I can go back and watch WrestleManias 1 through 20 without watching WrestleMania 32 or whatever era that people are. And again, all fairness, a lot of people are liking wrestling again, but there was an era in between of like something like the dark times. You know, how can you see? Bubba Hicks says right there, only evil time travelers can ruin your childhood. Kayla Silva wasn't even born for G1 Transformers, but she loved Bumblebee and she can appreciate the first 5 minutes of that CG cinematic.
It's
so like, Kayla, I'm used to being
all over again.
I'm used to being the young one in the room, Kayla. So you're like, because the fact you're like more than a decade younger than me. Like when I tell people I was born in '82, they're like, "How can you be a Star Wars fan?" And I call it I actually call it A New Hope. Rather than Star Wars 77, right?
Yeah, that's okay.
So,
well, I don't even. Well, I've only been saying 77 just to sort of, as so you know what I'm talking about. Because when I say it, if I were to say my favorite movie is Star Wars, well, you'd be like, which one?
Which one?
Yeah, I'm just gonna stop my camera. You guys keep talking. Yeah. You guys keep talking.
But when it was originally released, it didn't say, it wasn't called A New Hope.
No, it wasn't.
And I have that version, which is crazy. I feel like with the Disney era, like just find the positives. There's so many positives.
I agree with you. I mean, when there was talk about, Lucas is getting ready to retire and, he's putting the farm up for sale per se, like, I don't think there was anybody that didn't think that Disney was the right place for it to go. Where else would you sell it? Like, who else would handle it the way that, well, for good or for bad, who else would handle it the way that it's been handled? I don't think there's another studio out there that would be able to do it.
No. And then, I mean, just speaking of Disney era, like one of the best things about Star Wars that Disney's brought is Galaxy's Edge. Like, have you been to Galaxy's Edge?
I have yet. No, I mean, I live in like central Ontario, so it's a long way away from me. You shouldn't be able to say anything bad about Disney, because I've seen in person the Millennium Falcon. That's an amazing.
No one else would have done that, especially on Disney's level. Like if you go to like Universal Studios, they have Hogwarts, and you look at Hogwarts, but behind it there's like a giant warehouse.
Right? It's like
Disney's
a facade,
right? Disney's like keeping everything.
They want you to be immersed in that experience.
And so, like, I'm going to tell you right now, Wes, like, you're going to get to Galaxy's Edge at some point.
I hope so.
And by now you've seen thousands of pictures of your friends and fellow Star Wars podcasters in front of the Millennium Falcon.
Yep.
Absolutely nothing will prepare you for when you come face to face with it.
Oh, wow.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. Yeah. You think you've seen every picture? Wait till you see it in person. It's like, it's that view. It's that shot in Solo.
Sure.
When he first sees the Falcon and he's looking.
Oh, yeah.
And that feeling you get with John Powell doing the music, the classic Star Wars theme during that moment, even though it's technically Luke Skywalker's theme.
Yep.
But when he plays the Star Wars theme as he looks up at the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon for the first time, you feel it in your body in the theater while you watch that moment. Like, you get the chills. Imagine that, but like a ton of bricks.
I always anytime I go to a convention, whether it's Fan Expo Canada or the Toronto Comic Con, and the local garrison of the 501st is there, and I mean, I am just enamored with the costuming, and I just love it so much. And I kind of hang around on the periphery, like I'm that guy, like, oh man, this is so cool. You know, I don't have a costume, but I kind of wish I did. And,
being a Galaxy's Edge is something that Disney brought to Star Wars. And I mean, I will never say a bad thing about Disney Star Wars, because when you go on Rise of the Resistance, they put you in Star Wars like you'll never believe. Like you won't believe what you've been through. When I went on a cast preview for Rise of the Resistance, and me and my wife came out of it completely speechless. We couldn't believe what we just went through. And that's a feeling that I still like. It's a memory that I'm holding on. Like, I still remember it. And Disney did that for me. And it's something they can't take. No one can take that away from me.
Right.
And anybody who has any problem with Disney, like, look at what they gave us. There's even if you don't like Solo, there's got to be something in Solo that you do like. Like, you finally get to see the
Kessel Run. Solo. Yeah.
So my whole thing is, even though I hated the prequels, I gave it some time before I started really ripping into them. And then by the time I got to it, I was like, I don't need to rip into these. There's no reason for me to rip into these.
I honestly feel that it's a byproduct of my age. Like I said earlier, being an older guy coming into it, the way that I watch film, and not just Star Wars, but just film and television in general, is not the same way that I watched as a 20-year-old young man. I'm way more tolerant of things. I'm way more open to other ideas and concepts. And I just find that it's a better, and honestly, now that I've been podcasting and talking about Star Wars in a way that I've never talked about it before, I find I watch things differently, knowing that I'm going to talk about them. So I need to really pay attention in a way that I've never done before. And it's totally refreshing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I knew you two would bring the heat. You two would bring the passion and all that. I do want to ask, though, like, I know, Ralph, you said you're not a toy collector, but you must collect something Star Wars related. And Wes, what do you...
Wow. I can't turn the camera. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got about 10 unopened 6-inch Black Series figures sitting over here.
I was gonna say, like, what do you gents collect? Like, that's prequel related. I guess, Wes, since you're talking about it, just finish us off there.
Well, I'm an action figure guy. I mean, Star Wars was a huge part of my childhood. I mean, the vintage run of Kenner action figures was a big part of my life. And then as an adult, I went off and joined the service, and I never looked at toys again until like 2006. And I mean, when Star Wars Black Series came out in 2013, that 6-inch Black Series, that was my gateway to get back into Star Wars in a meaningful way as a collector, and I've been with it ever since. So I got a real soft spot for clone troopers. And as I said to you the other day, Ken, I said I don't army build per se. Like, I don't buy the generic clone and buy 10 of them. But each unique individual clone, I will try to pick up at least one. And I think I'm at 45 distinct different clones.
I need the leaders myself. Like, I need Cody and I need Rex, and I guess Hunter counts as a clone leader as well.
Absolutely,
although his squad is smaller because he's a smaller squad. And Ralph, what are you playing with over there?
I don't have too many prequel collectibles. I have stuff like this. Jay from Toy Geek gave this to me. This is a toy I had when I was a kid, a Millennium Falcon diecast metal.
Oh, the diecast Kenner.
Yeah, I love it. This is a toy I show on every podcast, whether it's Star Wars related or not. It's an Ewok phone that's really cool.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
But the two prequel things I have,
that's the Disney Store exclusive.
Oh yeah, that's nice. That's nice. I don't have a lot of prequel stuff. I have several lightsabers, and these are my prequel ones. I have the Mace Windu.
Very nice.
One of the nicest looking, and then the Obi-Wan.
Fair enough.
Episode 1 and 2 Obi-Wan saber.
Well, when we say prequels, I mean Clone Wars counts as being in that era, right? So if you end up with
for sure it does.
I've got like Black Series
Ahsoka.
figures, they're downstairs, but they're Clone Wars, so right.
And
So.
then I got the Ray saber.
That's really nice.
It's it's I'm a lightsaber dude.
I have.
So I don't do too much collecting, but
I have
my fair share.
the first release Obi-Wan Force FX, the Hasbro one with the thick neck on it. I'm really wanting to upgrade that to the new one with the skinny neck.
This is I have the Force Effects. Oh, it's dirty. The Force Effects episode 5. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So did you have a favorite?
Technically, kind of prequely. Sort of.
Kind of.
It's not the same design as the Anakin one. It's a little slightly different. But technically,
Well, I said it's your father's lightsaber.
thing.
It's your father's lightsaber, is what they always called it. Because Obi-Wan picks up that lightsaber before he leaves him on
Mustafar.
Here's something.
Mustafar. I almost said Dagobah. I don't know why.
I'm a huge lightsaber fanatic, especially the Skywalker lightsaber. So when he picks in episode 3, Anakin's lightsaber looks slightly different. The band here is like a gold, and the switches look different and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got this sort of what do you call this? Like
the Texas Instruments, yeah.
So in episode 4, when Luke gets the saber, it's got different amount of these black things, the black handles. It's got 7, or it's got 5 instead of 7. I think that's right. And this has little clear bubbles on it.
Yeah.
Now, if you watch the Obi-Wan series, and Obi-Wan pulls the lightsabers boxes out of the sand, the bubbles are already on there.
Oh,
on
that's
the
cool.
saber. So somewhere between episode 3 and episode 4, or Obi-Wan, he changed the gold band and put on the bubbles. So I don't know, but the bubbles are gone by Empire Strikes Back.
That's such an interesting detail that's the first time that it's ever been brought to my attention. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that now.
Yeah, take a look at the insert shot from episode 3 where he picks it up. Take a look at the box when he opens it, and then the one he gives to Luke.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So,
cool. So did either of you have a favorite specific prequel character? Because mine's Obi-Wan. That's obvious.
Wow. Prequel. So I'm going to say this, going back to the Phantom Menace. I mean, Qui-Gon Jinn was the most interesting character for me in that movie. But overall, I mean, I've been an Obi-Wan guy since the original trilogy, since Alec Guinness, hello there. I love that character so much. And Ewan just really cemented sort of the reasons why I love that character. Such a well-written character, well acted in any era.
I don't really think I have one. I mean, like if we talk in original trilogy, like I like Wedge, I like Bosk, stuff like that. I don't know if I have a favorite prequel era character other than maybe my favorite Jedi. I always thought the coolest design was Ki-Adi-Mundi.
Okay,
he's in all 3 of them. He's really cool. He's kind of what I imagine a classic Jedi would be, sort of a samurai with the top knot. Watto's great, and then he also had the best death. I think the best death scene.
When because
fighting
he's rushing forward and all his clones blast him to
they
death.
Stop. Yeah, and he takes out a couple. He's able to block a few. It's better than Plo Koon, where he just like kind of crashes into a building. And...
I can't say Ki-Adi-Mundi had a better death than Mace. I just can't.
Oh well, I mean, I guess
Mace Windu's not dead.
Okay, fair enough.
That's just me. I'm just putting that out there. Mace Windu is not dead.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
We don't see the body.
Mace Windu.
There's plenty of room. There's wiggle room in there for them to bring him back.
I think Samuel L. Jackson's price just went up too high because as he got more famous over the years. I mean, he was already famous back then, but I just wonder if that's the reason why.
Well, when originally the Phantom Menace came out, before the Phantom Menace came out, he talked to George Lucas after hearing that he was making another Star Wars, and he's like, "Put me in. I'll do." I won't say what he said, but he said, He said he would be Lando's uncle. He said some other things, and he just wanted to be into it. So I think part of it. Yeah, I think he probably did it for scale or did it as a favor, but he loves Star Wars so much that I guarantee you, if they came to him and said, "We're going to do a Mace Windu series, Mace Windu lives. You're going to have robot hands." He's going to be in, and he's not going to be
one robot
full price.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
Did he get both of them? I thought he got both of them cut off.
Just one.
Was it just one?
Just one.
I think so. Yeah. Is he kind of?
It was a lightsaber arm.
Yeah, for sure it was, because it goes out the window before anything else.
Yeah. Well, wow. Whew. Gents, I knew you'd bring the heat today, but I'm in the mood to go and throw some Star Wars on. I gotta have lunch after this, but
what are you in the mood for? What Star Wars would you be in the mood for?
Yes, what flavor would you like today?
Yeah,
specifically
of Rogue One, a fun of Solo, something nostalgic.
I gotta ask, has Andor come out yet?
Yeah, September 21st.
Okay, I wasn't sure because I was sitting there. I'm like, I thought I had more runway because Cobra Kai started yesterday, and I'm still not fully caught up on Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, and I'm still watching all the A&D WWE biographies and Rivals. I'm not sure if you're a wrestling fan, Ralph. I know Wes, you were a fan at least through the Attitude.
I've been in and out over the years.
I think we talk mostly Golden Era and Attitude Era, right, Wes?
Rock and wrestling for me.
Rock and wrestling and a little bit of Austin and Rock, right?
Yep.
A little bit, right? So I don't know if you're much of a fan, Ralph, but I got to catch up on the Rivals series and the biographies, and I'm like, damn, and Andor's coming out next. What's going on here? There's just so much going on. I don't know. What am I in the mood for?
No room to complain.
September 21st, apparently.
With all the cool stuff coming out, there's no reason to complain about anything.
That
you don't like it, just move on to the next cool thing that you're lucky to have that I didn't have when I was a kid.
You see that trailer and 3 clone gunships roll in as they're diving towards the planet. I'm like, more clones. And then even
I'm
seeing
getting
that
nostalgic for prequel stuff.
Oh, yes. Me too.
Me too. Yeah. I might want to try checking out the sequel trilogy again because I never fully sunk my teeth. And yes, I saw all 3 in theater, but with all the hate around it, it kind of influenced my you know what?
Oh, never.
I don't even know what I'm looking for.
Never let people influence you on anything. You go watch Titanic. Even though I can't stand it, don't listen to me. I'm a different guy. There are people who like things, different things. You never ever let the internet influence your opinions or desires to see something. If you want to watch Star Wars, watch Star Wars.
Or do what we do, Ken. You find the biggest buzz of the week and then make fun of it on your own show and talk about how wrong they are.
Well, that's what's good about Fandom Power is consistency, right? Is you can kind of do that week to week hot topic thing, right?
All you got to do is hit any message board or Facebook group that is dedicated to the thing that you love, and you will find the discourse there, and it's easy to pick it apart. Most of these arguments don't hold water.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So the one thing I will say it's all emotionally based. And that's one thing we can all agree on is that Star Wars has taken us on this amazing emotional journey, highs and lows and everywhere in between. And I feel like this is the golden age that we are currently living in for Star Wars as a property. There's never been a broader selection of Star Wars. I mean, I made the joke, what flavor are you looking for today? But there are so many flavors, whether it's the old EU, the new canon novels, the new Marvel Comics run. Dark Horse is about to go and do another run of Star Wars comics. The young adult novels, the TV shows, the animation, and the films. There's never been a better time to be a Star Wars fan than right now.
And when it comes to toys, I often get made fun of by my friends because I first threw it out there, Adam, right, Wes, I'm from Go Figure. I'm like, I think we live in a new golden age of toys. He's like, No, not really. The golden age was the 80s, but I since fought that back and said, if we don't live in a golden age, we live in a Renaissance time where the fan has become the creator. You see a lot of Kickstarters out there, and
That's
Star
right.
Wars can by and large be the same way, but it's like a resurgence. You know what I mean? Like right now, the creator is still Disney and the shareholders there, but still, like we live in something of a resurgence, and there is always going to be something to like. Like if you don't like most of what Star Wars puts out there, majority of people still like Mandalorian. Majority of people will find things to like about Obi-Wan, even if they don't like all of it. You can always go back and watch the animated stuff, Clone Wars and Rebels, right? Mind you, I found maybe this would be a separate conversation, but I found Clone Wars and Rebels a little too episodic, like a little too 90s Star Wars Next Generation type of storytelling. So I find like it was a 90s type of pacing, but when it got good, it was unforgettably good. Like the last 4 episodes of Clone Wars. Absolutely right. And then like
last episode, 4-episode arc is just
oh gosh, right. And with Rebels, I didn't care for Ezra when he started. At the end of the series, I loved him. I found him really annoying.
Leaps and bounds.
I found him so annoying, right? And then Kanan's change in character pacing for Rebels, the conclusion of just a lot of things wrapped up.
Clone
and you get
Wars
to see
came
Rex
out
again as a middle-aged man, you know?
Clone Wars came out and they aimed very low at their audience. I mean, that theatrical release was right for kids.
Yeah.
I mean, Snips and Sky Guy and Tui. And I mean, over the course of the first season, all that just kind of sort of like toned down. And every season of Clone Wars just got successively better and more adult. And then Rebels, I mean, I think Rebels came out the gate aiming a little bit higher, even though Ezra with his little slingshotty thing, which that disappeared eventually too.
Thank goodness.
And it got better. And Rebels is my jam, by the way. Love Rebels.
Yeah.
Okay.
Rebels had me hooked because of the opening, the first episode, the Spark of Light or whatever it was called.
Yep.
They used classic Ralph McQuarrie design.
The whole series was so McQuarrie. Yes.
And I was like, oh, this is for me. This is, I mean, in those dark times and no Star Wars, like I was collecting the Art of Star Wars books. So I knew Ralph McQuarrie art like the back of my hand because that's all I had to look at. That was not 3 movies. And so like seeing those designs, and then when like just the simple fact that when the TIE fighters exploded in Rebels, they exploded with sparks. Like in Star Wars, the 1977, like that was like, oh, that's hitting Ralph right in the 9-year-old kid Ralph. Like, so Rebels felt like it was made for me and guys like me. And so I feel like a lot of guys our age are really into Rebels, I think.
Fair enough. Well, I enjoyed it a lot as well. Like I said, I found it a little episodic at times. I wasn't always chomping to watch it. When it got good, it got good. Anyway, really I know we've moved a little bit away from the prequel trilogy in this discussion, but I guess what that shows is it goes back to my question about did it have a legacy and how did it impact the franchise? It impacted it because we're talking about Clone Wars and Rebels right now.
I think just the fact that how interconnected everything is right now. I mean, right now on September 10th, 2022, how interconnected all eras of Star Wars are right now is a testament to the franchise in general, but also to the prequels where, and I've said this before, they are cherry picking the best parts of what they like and pulling it forward. And I don't see that trend stopping as we go forward.
There we go. So we're coming on the 90-minute mark, give or take here. Any of you gents have any closing remarks on either the prequel trilogy or your Star Wars love as a whole?
Wow. How do you encapsulate a whole?
I mean, I feel like it's just like, hey, if you want to love Star Wars, love Star Wars. If there's things in Star Wars you don't love, you don't have to. But don't yuck on other people's yum. Don't go and be a jerk about it. Be on the light side of things. Be good. Have conversations. If there's something you disagree about, have a healthy conversation. And, you might learn something new. You might get a new perspective. Everyone's different. So everybody has different views. That's not, an invitation to fight about it. It's an invitation to discuss, and you might learn something new.
I think what we're doing today is probably the best thing that you could do, is have conversations like we're having, where yes, we are fans of things. But Ralph, there's certain things about Star Wars that you don't like that maybe I don't agree with, and maybe there's things that I like about Star Wars that you don't like, and there can be a pleasant disagreement, and we can have those conversations and talk about it, and still walk away at the end of it all going, man, I still love Star Wars, and that was a pretty good conversation.
Yeah,
awesome. Well, you know what? Thanks to both of you gentlemen for being here, and for everyone who joined us in the chat. Subscribe to Live Action Star Wars, subscribe to Fandom Power, consider joining the Toy Connections channel membership. It's only $1 a month, and I think that's $1 Canadian, so it's a little bit less in American. So, and
Well done.
well done, exchange rate. But gentlemen, I wish I could sit here and talk Star Wars all day with you two fantastic folks. Like, this was when I knew I was bringing you on, I knew I was going to get some good insights, and you have both exceeded my expectations on that particular regard. So I think we're going to cut that off right here. And tomorrow I will be releasing a video on my vintage collection, my vintage toy collection. I'll be doing a 30-minute tour, and the following week will be my retro modern collection. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe to both these gentlemen and watch this on the replay. But otherwise, we'll bid you farewell and see y'all next time.
Thanks for having me, Ken.
Thanks, gentlemen. Take care.